touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Rammer, jammer, yellow hammer, come see how we rock this. Alabama fans the best, there's no way you can top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Hey everyone, welcome into The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. This is a new week of shows. As always, I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine. If you're not subscribed to Touchdown Alabama on YouTube, go ahead, do it really quickly. Hit that subscribe button below. Also, be sure to leave a like whether you are subscribed or not. I am going to be here every Tuesday and Thursday evening to break down the latest in Crimson Tide football recruiting news. To get this week of shows rolling today, I'm going to discuss a couple of different 2022 prospects who I feel the Crimson Tide are rising with at the moment. I talked about a couple of guys on the last couple of episodes of The Process, but I'm going to talk about a different group of guys on today. I will also update a couple of other guys' recruitment who the Crimson Tide look to be heavily involved with as well. But we are going to start this episode off by talking about a couple of intriguing recruiting updates. So with that being said, let's get the process started. Let's get this set of intriguing updates rolling. I had an opportunity to travel to Atlanta over the weekend to check out the Pylon 707 event, and multiple Tide targets and one Tide commit was actually in action. The Tide commit who was in attendance was four-star linebacker Robert Wigert. I had an opportunity to catch up with him, get an update on his players to the Crimson Tide. You guys can check out that article over at touchdownalabama.com. I also got an opportunity to check out the Crimson Tide's five-star defensive back target, Jacoby Mathews out of Louisiana. The Crimson Tide is one of the schools listed in his top 6 at the moment. I will talk about Mathews a little later in the show, but you guys can check out my interview with him at touchdownalabama.com as well. There were several highly ranked prospects at this particular event, including four-star running back Damari Alston out of Georgia. He participated with the Fast Houston 707 organization. He is considered one of the Tide's top remaining running back targets. He actually told me, basically confirming what I talked about a couple of weeks ago in the process, and that is that the Crimson Tide is looking to add another running back to his 2022 recruiting class after picking up a commitment from Emmanuel Henderson. I talked with Damari Alston about his contact with the Crimson Tide. He also talked about Emmanuel Henderson committing to the Crimson Tide, so be sure to check out that over at touchdownalabama.com. Perfect time to pick up your subscription. With that subscription, you will be able to access all of this exclusive information. I had a chance to see one of the Crimson Tide's most recent offered prospects in 6'4" wide receiver Hakeem Williams out of Florida in action. He was very impressive, a 6'4", very physical wide receiver. You guys can check out some of his highlights on our YouTube page right now. Also, be sure to check out my interview with him. He told me that he was wishing and hoping for an offer from Alabama. The Crimson Tide, it looks as if they're going to be one of his top schools moving forward in his recruitment. We all know how the Crimson Tide have been really successful in recruiting wide receivers from the state of Florida. Hakeem Williams is definitely a prospect I would keep an eye on in the 2023 recruiting class. Another wide receiver target for the Crimson Tide who was in action was four-star wide receiver Cameron Miller out of Tennessee. Had an opportunity to catch up with him. He talked about the Crimson Tide being included in his top 6 in January. He said the Crimson Tide are still continuing to recruit him hard. Another exclusive article you guys can check out over at touchdownalabama.com. There's plenty more from that event that is going to be posted on touchdownalabama.com soon. But now I am going to roll into a couple of 2022 prospects who I feel the Crimson Tide are making a move for. Today, I am going to talk about 3 recruits who I feel the Crimson Tide are making a move for or are right involved in their recruitment. And I'm going to start this discussion off by talking about Trequon Fegans, the 4-star defensive back out of Oxford High School in Oxford, Alabama, one of the Crimson Tide's top in-state targets. A couple of weeks ago, it looked as if the Georgia Bulldogs were the leader for Trequon Fegans. He even came out and expressed that they were the school recruiting him the hardest. He talked about his relationship with their head coach, Kirby Smart. Their coaching staff even offered his younger brother, who is currently an 8th grader at Oxford High School. He even told me that once visits were allowed, once the NCAA lifted the current recruiting dead period, he was looking forward to visiting schools, and Georgia was going to be the first school that he was going to visit. But now it looks as if the Crimson Tide are trying to get more involved in Fegans' recruitment as of late. He recently got on a phone call with Nick Saban, and that sort of shifted things in Alabama's direction a little bit. From a source close to his recruitment, very close to his recruitment, his exact words were that Alabama is heating up in Trequon's recruitment. So I would definitely look out for Alabama picking up their push for the in-state 4-star defensive back. I know I talked about some of the cornerbacks Alabama is targeting here in this 2022 recruiting class on a recent episode of The Process. I would now put Trequon Fegans in that conversation because it looks as if the Crimson Tide are starting to pick back up their push with one of their top in-state targets in the 2022 recruiting class, one of the more athletic defensive backs in the nation when it comes to the 2022 recruiting cycle. But the next prospect I want to talk about today is a guy I talked about earlier in the show, and that is Jacoby Mathews, the 2022 5-star defensive back out of Louisiana. I had an opportunity to catch up with him at that Pylon 707 event over the weekend. He told me that the Crimson Tide's coaching staff has been recruiting him hard ever since they offered him. They actually offered him in 2019. So he has a pretty established relationship with the Crimson Tide, especially their defensive coordinator and Louisiana area recruiter, Pete Golding. He told me that they talk multiple times a week, so I would definitely look out for the Crimson Tide and Jacoby Mathews recruitment. They were able to pull in Kane Williams from the state of Louisiana in the 2021 recruiting class. They consistently recruit the state of Louisiana pretty well, so I definitely will look at Jacoby Mathews as being one of their top Louisiana targets in this 2022 recruiting class. They are currently targeting a lot of different prospects from that state, but I will put Jacoby Mathews right at the top when it comes to the Crimson Tide's top safety targets here in this 2022 recruiting class. He was pretty impressive at that 707 event as well, so I feel Alabama is at least right in the mix for Jacoby Mathews. I don't think he has a leader at the moment. He told me that a commitment for him could come at any time from today to National Signing Day, so he does not have a commitment time frame in place. He's going to commit when he feels most comfortable. So Jacoby Mathews is another 2022 prospect to know from the state of Louisiana. The last prospect is another prospect I talked about earlier in the show, and that is Cameron Miller, the 4-star wide receiver out of Tennessee. One of the 2022 wide receivers who the Tide is recruiting from the state of Tennessee as he joins Baron Brown, a product of Trequon High School in Nashville, Tennessee. Miller has a top 6, and in that top 6, he has a couple of SEC programs, including Florida, Tennessee, and he also has Ole Miss involved. He told me that Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, and Illinois is currently showing him the most love at the moment. He is in constant contact with the Tide's defensive line coach, Freddie Roach, who is his main recruiter. He tells me that they talk multiple times a week as well, so he's definitely feeling a lot of love from the Crimson Tide. Unfortunately, he was not able to play his junior season due to COVID-19 and the global pandemic, but he is playing 707 with the Tennessee Select 707 organization, so he is trying to sharpen his game. So Miller is another prospect the Crimson Tide is showing a lot of love to here in this 2022 recruiting class. A bigger body wide receiver who can create some separation in his route running, so I was impressed with the way he played over the weekend as well. So Cameron Miller is another prospect to watch here in this 2022 recruiting class. Alabama is continuing to recruit him as well. If they are not the leader for Cameron, I would say they are at least one of the top schools in his recruitment. I think they are doing really well when it comes to the 4-star wide receiver out of Tennessee. That will do it for this episode of The Process. Be sure to hit that subscribe button before you leave. Also, be sure to leave a like as well. Then head over to touchdownalabama.com. Pick up your subscription today. We'll With that subscription, you will be able to read all of our subscriber-only articles, get your hands on our yearly print and magazine issue, also get an opportunity to read our in-depth scouting reports on each child to commit in each recruiting class. Then head to the Google Play Store if you have an Android device, or to the Apple App Store if you have an Apple device, to download the Touchdown Alabama app. With that app, breaking news notifications can be sent to you by the Touchdown Alabama staff, so be sure to do that as well. As always, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine.
Process.